It's designed to equip LSPs with the tools and insights to make key operational decisions as they grow.
It's a powerful backer. It's one of the biggest private equity funds in Europe.
And so this is highly sensitive, high risk scenario translation when it relates to clinical trials.
And welcome everyone. Hello from Slater Pod 84 today. Hi, Esther.
84. Hi, Florian.
I'm
How you
okay.
doing?
How are you? You're back.
Yes, I feel like I missed a ton of things.
Yeah, you have. So we have to go through a ton of things today. So we're not going to dwell too much on each. It's kind of rapid fire news stories. A lot of it from our preferred segment, the M&A, right? All of this acquisitions and fundings going on. But today we have a special guest. Our very own Anna Wyndham is going to join us. So
very good.
She is going to talk about our upcoming Pro Guide on language operations, mostly geared towards LSPs. So we called it Pro Guide to Language Operations, how successful LSPs structure operations, manage supply chains, mitigate risks, execute program management, and scale internationally, which is what everybody wants to do. So I don't know. This is going to be what, a 40-page report, roughly?
Yeah, I think at least.
At the very least. Anyway, so Anna joins us, walks us through this. And then, of course, for the buyers and the strategy package subscribers, we're going to have a briefing in about a month from now. But first, next week, we're going to have the video log briefing. And then on September 8th, we are having SlaterCon remote, which now the agenda is complete. Spoke about it last time on the pod, so I'm not going to go through this again. Fantastic agenda. I think we're looking at least 300 people on the day in terms of participants, speakers, etc. We got the booth set up. We're recording videos, etc. So it's going to be a fantastic conference again. And tentatively, we're looking at maybe doing something in person towards the end of the year. Probably some hybrid conference. I think we should just do it here in Zurich, but let's see. So I don't have to
Or
travel.
here in London.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. London would be possible too. I could go to London. I think if we let the audience vote, I guess it's probably going to be London. So Esther, you don't want to travel? Is that what you're saying here?
No, it's not. I don't want to travel.
Yeah.
I like London. Well, I like London. Don't get me wrong. Actually, I wouldn't mind going to Zurich either. Little trip.
Little trip. All right, today we're going to talk about semantics, language wire, Boost Lingo, the big word. Then also an M&A in the life sciences space, which was a little bit under the radar. But, you saw all of those companies that I mentioned before were either they got funding or, well, actually all of them got funding, except Semantics that got acquired. So let's get started with Semantics. So we had Britta, of course, on pod number 60 back in February. And they closed a big deal. So they sold Semantics to TransPerfect, which is TransPerfect's largest M&A transaction in the company's history. How large was the deal, Esther?
The deal? I don't think we have the multiple specifically.
Can we guess?
Although we do know. Yeah, I mean, so we've got Semantics' revenues, which were 87 million. Well, they're on track to deliver $87 million in 2021, and TransPerfect told us that the multiple exceeds 1x revenue.
So let's just call it $100 million price.
Round up, round down, but circa 100 million. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Semantics again, $87 million in revenue. So sold for, I don't know, let's just say roughly $100 million to TransPerfect. Semantics has 14 offices, 300 staff members in the Nordics. So that's quite light for almost $90 million in revenue. And then Phil Shaw, the CEO of TransPerfect, told us there's only modest overlap. I think that TransPerfect has had quite a strong presence in the Nordics already. But obviously with this, they're basically getting, this must be the top position in terms of Nordics. And Nordics being, let's just include all of them. Finland, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, of course. There's all this kind of inner Scandinavian thing between like what's Scandinavia, what's the Norden, etc. But let's just call the Nordics all of these broader Scandinavian countries. So, and the PE fund that owned Semantics was Segula, the Segula Fund 5. And this apparently is the third exit for that fund. So one fewer PE fund active in the industry, but not to be outdone, the private equity industry came right back in. So Catacap, another private equity fund, sold LanguageWire, or the stake in LanguageWire, to Bridgepoint Development Capital, or Bridgepoint. No pricing was disclosed, but basically it's a swapping of PE firms. And so this is quite a big PE firm, Bridgepoint. It's they're managing around roughly $30 billion in assets, focusing on what's called in private equity circles like mid-market deals. So that those are not the small deals, but also not the 1 billion plus deals. So between 100 million to like a billion euros. And interestingly, and I'm trying to unpack this, but like Bridgepoint actually listed, they went IPO. They listed in London.
See, it's all happening in London.
Yeah, still
Just
happening.
Just a quick plug.
Finance isn't leaving London. There's no chance. Come on, Amsterdam. Nice try. They all tried. No one can unseat London. So they IPO'd in London at like a $4 billion valuation. So this is, I'll let somebody else unpack this, but it's interesting that a private equity firm would now be publicly listed, buying, of course, a private asset like LanguageWire. But it's basically the kind of the management company, the management holding company that's buying these assets. I don't think you're not sure.
You're not like automatic. It's not like a SPAC where you automatically become a listed company by virtue of the fact that your owners are listed.
Yeah, I think let's bring on some PE guys at some point to just unpack. I mean, I don't want to unpack like SPACs and PE firms, but and the dynamics if you're a publicly listed private equity firm. I don't actually, okay, let's not even go there. It's a rabbit hole too deep for me to jump in. So, but it's a powerful backer. It's one of the biggest private equity funds in Europe. So LanguageWire really, and again, LanguageWire obviously is a roughly, $70-80 million. Hang on, they told us. So they're on track to do roughly $75 million US in 2021 revenues, had a strong first half, they told us. And they got about 400 people it's fairly Europe-centric in terms of the geographic distribution. Deal closed on August 15th. And they said that Bridgepoint had been closely observing the language market for some time and ultimately contacted LanguageWire early in the year through, the now former shareholder Catacap. We had actually Rasmus Lockwick on at SlaterCon Zurich, the in-person. 2018. Yes, exactly. That was at the time when they had acquired Explanation. So congratulations to the Catacap team. That was a well-executed, perfect strategy. I mean, it was 4 years. They held LanguageWire, from A to Z, bought a big asset, and then eventually, of course, now exited with what must have been quite a decent return.
Is this their first exit or one of their first exits? I remember them not having.
I remember that. Yeah. It must be one of their first, if not the first. So, Congrats. It's good for them, and ultimately it's going to be good for LanguageWire because if you have a partner like Bridgepoint, they're going to take a seat in the board and they're going to support LanguageWire. Quite interesting. So Johan Dahlfors, the partner at Bridgepoint Capital, said tech-enabled players of scale will be well positioned to take an increasingly larger share of the overall market, while more traditional service players will likely find it more challenging. And by tech-enabled, I mean LanguageWire has a fully integrated proprietary translation management system. Really probably one of the strongest ones in the space. So they are also, in my view, well positioned for being one of the winners in the space. And the Johan Dahlfors, he also said about the industry as a whole, he says long-term structural growth trends driven by globalization, digitization, technology advancement help boost translation demand, localization demand. In addition, the language services market, is, as we know, highly fragmented, predominantly addressed by more traditional service players. And they see clear opportunity for consolidation, which means M&A. So LanguageWire is going to be active in that part as well, in the M&A part. And then there were a bunch of companies advising the deal, like EY, Gorriss Federspiel, Deloitte, and for LanguageWire, and then for Bridgepoint, it was Akura, Alantra, Alvarez Marshall, and Ethsis, in Technica, and full disclosure, Slater on the market side. So we helped with market analysis on that deal as well, fully disclosing that. And Bridgepoint put that in a press release. So that's great. In terms of Nordic consolidation, I mean, those are two big news items, two big things that happened, right, in the Nordics. So it's kind of a powered up LanguageWire combined now with with a TransPerfect, now with a very strong presence in the Nordic. This will make it very highly competitive, the Nordics as a marketplace going forward. So good luck if you're trying to compete up there with an undifferentiated offering, because you have quite strong competitors there now. Hey, just closing off, and then let you say a few words.
Keep going and listening. I'm
soloing this. I got used to it last time. So BoostLingo also raised some money. BoostLingo is the video remote interpreting company based in San Francisco. I actually visited their office back in 2018. Great team. They raised from a private equity firm. Growth equity firm, Mainsail Partners. So Esther, what's the difference between growth equity and private equity in terms of just usage?
Again, maybe a question that should be answered by a specialist. But my understanding is that, growth equity is a type of private equity essentially, but growth equity is with the specific design to take a company and grow it. So you buy into a company which is about to or currently undertaking a high growth phase. So it's typically earlier on than sort of institutional, larger private equity transactions.
Correct. I guess that growth equity would kind of plug the gap between like VC, late stage venture capital, then you have growth equity, and then you have like the more traditional private equity. Private equity, of course, can go into also firms that aren't on a super high growth trajectory and can restructure, etc. So yeah, growth equity is kind of past the VC stage, but not really yet in the kind of more little lower growth PE world. Yeah, sorry to all of the finance experts who may or may not listen to this. So BoostLingo, they more than doubled revenue in 2020. Obviously, it was a great time to be a video remote provider, and good luck to BoostLingo and the team. And they're going to be joining us at SlaterCon remote as well, so they have a booth. Good for them, good for us. So now you tell us more about WCG acquiring Verasai, and that is in clinical trial and related translation services.
Yeah. Well, I think, like you said, this is one that maybe flew a little bit under the radar for most of the industry. And I think the primary reason for that is because, these guys do services which extend far beyond the reach of pure translation, just translation. But they are specialist players, both of them, in clinical research. And so US-based companies, both of them. WCG, pretty large organization specialized in life sciences, clinical trial solutions, ethical review. They have around 4,000 staff globally. And they've done lots of acquisitions previously to gain more of a stronghold in that niche. But so they've acquired Verasai, and I think this happened in mid to late July. Verasai, somewhat smaller, e-clinical software provider. Translation services is also part of their offering, as well as endpoints and assessments. So they were acquired by WCG for a price tag of $330 million US. That is according to a regulatory filing. So I think here's where we managed to dig a bit and find some quite interesting information about WCG, and also about the price tag and everything. So there was this regulatory filing for WCG because actually they plan to do an IPO on the NASDAQ quite soon. So they were disclosing a lot of different things about their business, including details of the acquisition. So WCG, I said, is somewhat large. They generated, so the entity is WCG Clinical Inc. They generated $464-ish million last year in 2020, and about $140 million in the quarter that ended in March. So this extends beyond translation, like I said, and I think translation had somewhat of a part to play. We did talk to WCG and ask them a bit about what translation means to them, how they kind of view this within the broader life sciences and clinical research offering. And they said, so this is Donald Diezzo, who is the exec chairman and CEO of WCG. He said, translations have indeed been a key aspect of our considerations. Having these capabilities now in-house to serve the many clinical trials in which we are engaged will be a meaningful benefit to our customers over time. So their customers, being the likes of clinical trial sponsors, contract research organizations as well. He also told us that VeraSi's setup is that they use freelance translators. They also have a team of in-house translators, and then every translation goes through a expert review phase. And so this is highly sensitive, high risk scenario translation when it relates to clinical trials. And he told us that VeraSi does not use machine translation because of the critical nature of the work we do. His rationale was the cost of translation and cultural adaptation are just a fraction of the cost of a clinical trial. But sort of the counterpoint to that being the cost of an incorrect translation is super high and the risks to patients are very real. So this is, a very firm niche that they have, but they also said that they see localization, translation as a growing service.
Yeah, it shows how deeply embedded translation is in the whole clinical setting, that they feel it's so core that they should own it, right? And also sell it. They see a commercial opportunity. And then, I wonder how deeply they've thought about MT, but it would be interesting at some point to talk to experts and just understand in that really core clinical area how advanced MT is. Let's pin a note. Put a pin in this and try to answer that question. Is their approach saying the risk outweigh the benefits by far? Is that a common theme still in clinical trial translation, or are they an outlier a little bit?
I think you still have the whole concept of kind of back
that
translation and the kind of the end result needs
the linguistic
and the end
validation
result needing to be quite equivalent. Culturally equivalent rather than linguistically similar. So I think that's maybe a big consideration, but I agree we should absolutely delve into that a bit more with some experts.
Yeah, let's build out the agenda for the rest of the year for the pod. Speaking at SlaterCon will be Joshua Gold, the CEO of the Big Word, who, Big Word also got some private equity investment. Susquehanna, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Isn't that a city in the States?
Sounds like it.
Susquehanna sounds like some southern town. Sorry, I've never traveled that part of the world. Anyway, tell us more about Susquehanna Private Capital.
I was referring to them as
Word
SPC because it felt more pronounceable. So. And they said, that's fine as well. So, Big Word Group also got private equity investment from SPC. So the SPC has acquired a majority stake in the Big Word, which is a UK-based language service provider. So in terms of the size, again, Big Word is a well-known name in the UK. It's also pretty sizable. We don't have their 2020 revenues, but we know that they generated around $107 million in 2019. So they're likely somewhere around $120-ish million, and definitely one of the larger or largest UK-based LSPs by revenue. So interestingly, I think it's a big story in the sense that the Gould family are a pretty well-known name, and Larry Gould, I think, has one of the biggest social media followings that I've seen on I think on LinkedIn, actually, in the industry. And so Larry Gould and his family, Josh Gould, you mentioned as well, have been the owners of the company for more than 40 years. So Larry Gould was also the founder. grew the company. It's a pretty key player in the public sector translation and interpreting space. In particular, you see the name pops up quite a lot in some of the deal wins that we cover in the public sector as well. The Joshua Gould, I think, as you mentioned, is now the group CEO of the Big Word, and Larry, his father, is exec chairman at this point. Josh told us that he and his father will retain a significant minority shareholding in the business. We don't have any, or they didn't disclose any terms, the percentage that SPC acquired or anything. But he also said there will be no foreseeable changes to the current leadership of the team.
Makes sense. I mean, it's something similar that we're seeing at LanguageWire as well. This isn't an outright 100% acquisition. I think the current management team retains a minority, and so very strongly incentivized, of course, to have the business perform. And just to jump in, so Susquehanna is not a town. I'm sorry to all of our U.S. listeners. It's a river. It's a major river located in the Mid-Atlantic region, and so going through Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland. So. All right.
Thank you.
Just to clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, I can carry on a bit more about the Big Word. So sure. In the public sector, I mean, I think have a lot of different organizations that they work with, including NATO, US government, UK government. We also covered a news story where they secured a 3-year extension to this large Ministry of Justice contract that was earlier in 2021. And Josh told us that they also have a really strong pipeline of contract wins that should be starting to roll out and be implemented during 2021. The new owners, as you said, you did that little bit of research. The SPC, they focus on US and European investments, primarily in the areas of business services, consumer franchise services, healthcare, industrial technology, so quite broad reaching. But the plan is now with SPC, continue to develop WordSync, which is the Big Word's translation and interpreting management system. So they describe this as their all-in-one localization platform. And Joshua Gould told us that there's currently around $100 million in revenue going through that platform. So that would obviously, again, point to the size of their business. Presumably they have a small amount of revenue not going through that platform potentially as well. But yeah, SPC, he said, will support M&A and organic growth. Big Word wants to continue to expand their presence in Europe and also plan or want to become a force to be reckoned with in the US and Asia.
Yeah. Good. So the Big Word, closing on the Big Word, moving on to operational
not least,
challenges.
Growing into the US and Asia.
No, exactly. That'll throw up the odd challenge. But I think I think Josh was actually based. Yeah, he's based in New York, right? So I think or he was at least. Cool. So let's hop over to Anna and have Anna talk a bit about our latest report, the Language Operations Pro Guide. And welcome back, everyone, to SlaterPod 84 today with our very own Anna Wyndham. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Florian.
Hey.
Hi, Esther. It's great to be here.
Cool. Thanks for joining today. Where are you based, Anna? Where are you joining us from? Tell us.
I'm in Madrid, in Spain.
Exactly. For obviously, we know that. We've worked with you for how long have you been with Slater? Tell our audience a little bit more about how long you've been with us, what your career was prior to Slater, and what you're working on for us.
Yeah, so I've been with Slater for just over a year, working as part of the research team, working on different research reports. And I guess I've been in the language industry for quite some time. I started in Sydney, Australia with Appen, working on speech recognition databases. I moved to London where I worked with Donnelly Language Solutions as a production lead. And then as I moved into quality management when I moved to Madrid, working with SDL before joining you guys at Slater.
Fantastic. So good career, great companies, and great background for us, of course. Very happy to to work here with you. And today you're going to tell us more about our Slator Pro guide that we just published by the time this comes out on language operations. And I love the sublead. It says how successful LSPs structure operations, manage supply chains, mitigate risks, execute program management, and scale internationally. So, Anna, just tell us a bit more about how long is the report? What are some of the key content? Just take it away.
So yes, the Language Operations Pro Guide, it's a 40-page guide, and it's designed to equip LSPs with the tools and insights to make key operational decisions as they grow and as they're faced with different risks and new risks and challenges along with that growth. So it's packed with data analysis and case studies and tools. We drew on data from various sources and interviewed 11 LSPs that are at different stages of their growth. So small to mid-size to super agencies from across Europe, Asia, and North America. And I should probably take the chance just to shout out and thank the LSPs who spoke to us. It was really interesting to speak to them and to understand how they made those key decisions and turning points along the way through their growth journey.
So just to jump in for a second. So when you speak to them, is this like what we call like on the record, all of it, or was it a lot of kind of background research? How did you handle the confidentiality aspect here?
So all the interviews were on the record. So the LSPs were happy to speak to us about basically how they grew or where they started from, and the changes that they've made in their organizations in response to different challenges.
So I know there's a few different areas that we've looked at as part of this language operations report. Tell us a bit more about maybe the structure and the contents and the areas that you looked at as within the report.
Yeah, so there are five key areas, and then kind of at the end, we're kind of distilling all the information in a one-page operational milestone roadmap. So the 5 different areas are organizational structure. We look at how LSPs typically structure themselves, whether they follow a more functional or business unit structure. And we include a couple of case studies to provide insight as to why LSPs might choose one or the other and the triggers for restructuring. The second main area that we look at is linguist supply chain models. So obviously the key ones being the in-house, outsourced or hybrid mix. And again, we're talking to LSPs about why they chose the linguist supply chain model that they did and what they see as the rationale for selecting one over the other. The third main section is international expansion. I think this is probably the most interesting, one of the most interesting sections. So we analyze LSP's global footprints. We look at how many locations LSPs have at different stages of their growth and what the top countries are for international expansion. So when LSPs decide to expand, whether in region or to other regions, which countries are they deciding to go to? And what are the factors that they're taking into account? And we provide a one-page analysis also of the G20 countries, along with some other countries, in terms of which ones have the most potential as sales hubs or production hubs. And that's based on different indicators like the size of the language market, availability of language industry resources, ease of doing business, and so on. The fourth section... go ahead.
Sorry, no, just briefly. I mean, this is really interesting because it is such a big decision. And I was part of that, like with my previous work with CLS, like when we decided, okay, where are we actually going to open an office? And then what are you going to put there? Is it going to be a project management hub? Is it going to be a great, location to source potential linguists, or is it going to be a full-on sales presence? For example, I opened an office in Beijing, which was just purely sales and project, and client servicing, right? As opposed to some other, for example, in Spain, we had a big operational hub as well. So this is very, very critical for LSPs as they decide to grow or not decide to grow, as they are growing. And it's important in this business still, and we spoke about this many times, like you have to be on, despite the virtual nature of this business, and even now with COVID, I think if you're closer to the client, it's just easier to to do business. And as you're getting into the super agency stage and close those huge RFPs, if you don't have an in-country presence, it's just so much harder to get those big pieces of work and also deliver them eventually. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but move on. So we said how LSPs structure operations, linguistic supply chain models, international expansion, and then there is more in the report.
Yep. The two final sections are program management. So looking at when and why LSPs decide to add a layer of program management. So moving from kind of a project by project approach to processing client needs and creating instead a more coherent approach to client accounts. Focusing on how the LSP is going to retain and grow that client and also provide a more customized service as well. So we have a couple of really interesting case studies in there from We Localize, for example, in terms of how they've defined this role, what the purpose of that role is, and how they see that working. I think one of the quotes from that case study has to do with how they provide the client with a customized experience while ensuring that they're maximally reusing an internal existing processes and setups. So it's getting that balance of providing a customized service, but also getting that internal efficiency. And we also have a section on payment risks, and it's something that is language service providers are in quite a fairly unique position in terms of the number of different countries that they're dealing with in terms of international payments, and that applies whether they're small or large agencies. So we look at how different LSPs tackle that complexity, and also how LSPs can manage currency risk. So obviously LSPs are exposed to currency risk, paying out costs in different currencies to that in which they are paid. So there are various different options that LSPs might take to approach that challenge, and we provide some examples of that.
Well, I can just go on SmartCat. We had Ivan on the podcast last week, and they integrate all of that. I mean, they solve the payment component, which is, it's a huge pain. I remember that, like for our CFO.
I don't think we listed that in the report, did we? Just
no,
outsource it.
Yeah, outsourcing it. Yeah,
outsource
I mean,
the issue.
Outsourcing was an option that came up actually in the interviews. I think one of the LSPs we spoke to said, we're not an expert at international payments. We don't want to focus our efforts on that. We don't want to develop expertise in that. We would rather outsource. So it's one of the approaches.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And then I think you said the report ends with what is probably my favorite bit of it, which is the operational milestone roadmap, which I know that a lot of the interview information and insights went into compiling this. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is it's a one-page roadmap, and it basically lays out the key milestones that language service providers hit as they grow from 1 to 8 million, 8 to 25 million, or 25 million and above. These are obviously examples of that have been provided to us about what LSPs see as the key turning points in their journey, the key decision points, and the key changes that they've made. So obviously, starting from at the beginning, establishing a structure, establishing linguist supply chain technology, but then moving to expansion. And then as they get bigger and bigger, starting to focus more on retaining clients, retaining talent, and building in and expanding those functions that are dedicated towards managing risk and opportunities, and making sure that they're able to respond to changes internally, but also, of course, outside in the industry.
That's a great page. I love it. So, key takeaways. What's your top 3? Top 3 takeaways.
Okay, so key takeaways. We analyzed the typical global footprint of LSPs using data from the Slater Language Service Provider Index. We found that LSPs in the revenue bracket of 1 to 8 million in US dollars annually have on average a total of 4 offices distributed across 3 countries. And then for LSPs that are above 25 million, they have an average of 12 offices across 7 countries. And super agencies, which have revenues above 250 million, are averaging 54 offices across 26 countries.
That's a lot of offices.
It's a huge amount.
It's a lot of countries.
And a lot of countries.
It's a small sample. Obviously, it's like what, 4 or 5 super agencies. So yeah, I mean, you see that if you want to break into those top ranks, then yeah, happy office opening. So
yeah, and when they do expand, we looked at that, and what we found is that when LSPs go outside their headquarter country, the most popular countries to set up a production or a sales or customer-facing hub are, firstly, the United States in number 1 position. Secondly, China and Germany. Third was United Kingdom, followed by Spain and then Italy. So this is where LSPs are going when they expand.
So I have a question. This is setting up an office rather than acquiring another company, for example, or did we also take that into account?
Yeah, good question. It includes acquiring a company. So either acquiring or setting up or having having a country, an office set up in another country.
Got it.
One more. That was 2.
Yep. Third takeaway, linguist supply chain model. So what we found is that the dominant linguist supply chain model is a hybrid approach. And this was the case for small and large LSPs. But there's a difference in terms of where they weight the resources. So for smaller and mid-sized LSPs, they're more likely to lean towards having more in-house resources. And the larger LSPs and the super agencies are really distinctly leaning towards outsource. But it's interesting that they're still retaining in-house resources for to address very specific problems. So they're using them quite strategically. It might be that they need to secure resources in a language combination that's quite hard to recruit for, or in a specific subject area. And sometimes for immature supply markets, say India, where in-house training and tighter quality controls might be beneficial, they may decide to in-house those particular resources as well to get those benefits.
Great. So small ones still have in-house linguists. That's and the bigger ones are running these huge 10,000 freelancer operations. Hey, Anna, that was great. Thank you so much. We will come back in about a month from now when we do the briefing that we always do for each report. So there we're going to go into more detail for those of our listeners that decide to buy the report or that are already Strategy Package subscribers. So thanks so much. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.
All right. Bye-bye.